All right, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the annual Missouri Angus Association Education Forum. We appreciate the folks that have joined us here in attendance, and I know that we're recording this as well, so this will be out on our YouTube channel as well, the Missouri Angus Association. This morning in our forum, we're going to discuss some things about herd health and the animal husbandry, along with some health issues in getting cattle ready for events such as this that we're at right now this weekend, our Missouri Angus Futurity. And we have a very qualified panel this morning that is joining us. Three folks here that have extensive use in the livestock industry, along with the Angus breed. We have the Missouri Veterinary Extension. We have Dr. Scott Poock. And we have the herd manager at Side and Stricker Angus. That's Mr. Ben Eggers, along with the owner and manager of Love Ranch. We have Ms. Holly Meyer. Appreciate you folks being here with us today and taking time out of your busy schedules and to join us. Well, let's just get right into a few of the questions here this morning. One thing I'll start with, Dr. Poock, is when purchasing cattle, what are some management practices you should implement when integrating new stock into one's herd?
So if I'm purchasing animals to come into my herd, ideally a biosecurity plan. Number one, I'd want to maybe know some background history on these animals. What is their vaccination history? Are they testing for any diseases? What those results would be. But if once they're on my farm, the ideal standard, the gold standard would be those animals would come in and would be isolated for 30 days prior to entering the herd. That would be an adequate time for them if they were carrying something to come in to express it. And then it depends on my herd. What am I testing for in my herd? If you felt that animal hadn't had that type of testing, once they were in the herd and they're in that isolation, then they should be tested for those things as well. But I'd want to get a back history of them as much as I could, find out if they've done any testing, isolate them, and possibly do any testing that would be required for my own herd.
Excellent. Excellent.
Do you think it's unreasonable to ask someone that you're purchasing cattle from to test for something that's important to you?
No, I think my herd's my herd, and if that's what you want, I don't have any problem. I think you should be doing that. You should be asking for that information.
I think that's a great point, and in purchasing cattle, where you can actually engage with that buyer you're buying those cattle from prior to sale day, and I think that only would benefit both parties long term. So I'll take this next question over to Ben. Ben, what do you feel is one of the most detrimental health issues facing beef producers?
There's no doubt in Missouri, anaplasmosis and BLV would be two that are just so difficult to manage, virtually impossible to prevent, and there's no cure, definitely no vaccine for BLV. Years ago, we heard of a vaccination for BLV in Europe, and I actually carried a directive to National Cattlemen's and got it passed to bring that vaccine to America, but by the time we went through all those hoops, we found out the vaccine wasn't working anyway, so it didn't really matter. And on the anaplasm front, I'd like to hear Dr. Poock's views there. There is a laboratory in Louisiana that's making an anaplasm vaccine. It's been around for 20 or 25 years, but it does not have FDA approval. I think it is approved to come into Missouri. Of course, Mizzou right now is doing work on an anaplasm vaccine. An update if you're aware of anything that's going on there in terms of whether that looks like it'll be a 2 months or whatever you think?
So I'll start out with I was in private practice 19 years in Wisconsin, and anaplasm is not a problem. Anaplasm frustrates the heck out of me. And so I agree with you. It's, control your flies, change needles, change sleeves when palpating, clean up equipment, those kind of things can help. But it is frustrating. I understand it's frustrating. Unfortunately, yes, Mizzou is working on a vaccine. The last I heard, it probably will be more than a year before it will get to a point where it might be able to come out. The vaccine from Louisiana, if you petition the state with your veterinarian, it's possible to use that.
Well, I guess on those same lines, Holly, I'll come over to you and on the BLV. It's been prevalent in your area for sure, and how does that play a role in the overall health and in your herd or maybe the herds that surround you all?
So probably 25 or 30 years ago when we moved our herd from the north to the south, that's when we became familiar with BLV. Cattle that weren't thriving, we would test them for other things, thinking things were wrong. Maybe they had an IBR carrier, or maybe they just couldn't handle the heat. And inevitably, almost everything came back to BLV. So when we sorted that herd and separated those BLV cows, they would usually wean themselves out of the herd within 2 or 3 years because they would come open, they would get sick, they would starve a calf. All of the things that seemed to be management problems and cost us money went back to BLV. So I'm a big one for beating the drum on BLV, and we tested every year for it. Sometimes, though, there's false positives. And so when you're making management decisions, it's kind of costly to just get rid of cows off of the one BLV test. Most of the time it's accurate, and I think it's gotten better. So we don't test annually every year, but we still do spot tests, and every couple of years we test the whole herd. I just want to know if they're positive or not. I don't want to know if there's things you can do to make the titer go up. Dr. Poock can probably tell you more about that, but if you vaccinate within the time that you're testing, the titer will go up. So I want an accurate answer as to whether I'm going to cull a cow or not. But we found that it seems to be kind of genetic. So cows that had BLV, a lot of times their daughters, by the time they were 4 or 5 years old, when they get into any kind of stressor, such as having a calf or milking heavily, then the BLV seems to pop up and it goes downhill from there. So yeah, it's an issue. I wish they'd come up with a vaccine. I think it's a costly issue to anybody that's in the beef industry, and I think it's more prevalent now than it's ever been because we use dairy cattle, which you can't in dairy land. So when we use dairy cattle for recips, we just said, oh, come on into the beef herd and take over, and that's kind of what it's done. Same with the anaplasm. We never seen it a few years ago, and now it just keeps creeping and going north. So finding answers to those things would be huge in our bottom line, and I have an issue selling someone a BLV cow if I know she has BLV and I know it's an active titer. I know she's short-lived, so I know she's maybe going to get a year or two. Very rarely do they make it past 7 or 8 years old and breed back.
Excellent. I think on that same subject, Doctor, if I could come to you, would you explain to our audience, and we're going to have many people view this online as well, that maybe they're not as quite as familiar as some of us are, but explain to us exactly what BLV is.
Okay, it's bovine leukosis virus. So it's a virus that can cause, where you see a true devastation when it causes a lymphosarcoma. And so they invade the lymphocytes or the white blood cells, and they proliferate in there, and so you have increased numbers, which affects their immune system, and so they can't handle a lot of other things. Holly mentioned tests. There is so in the dairy world, yes, if you go out to the University of Missouri Foremost Dairy, about 80% are positive for leukosis. There is a newer test that you can, so that's the test you're doing is an antibody test, which some of those animals that might be false positive are animals who are exposed, fought off the disease, and yet carry a titer. if you want to get to which animals are probably really the carriers, there is a newer test that's a PCR that's looking for the virus DNA, and it will tell you whether they have a high load, medium load, or a lower load. So you can do that. So it's a virus that can cause lethal circulation.
Excellent. I think that's a great point to make just for our audience and especially our folks that are going to be watching online. So we brought it up a little bit earlier, and I'll go back to Holly just a quick moment here. What are some obvious warning signs of a problem, and are there questions you could ask a seller that would offer some transparency into the herd health?
I mean, the only question I think you could ask a seller is if they've been tested or not, and that's completely up to you. And some sellers will test without question, and other ones may balk a little bit, and that's just a personal issue between you and them. For us, the main things that we've seen was a slow breedback or no breedback. The cows would open, and traditionally, years ago, people flipped them to the next herd, and so like one of the things, we went to all fall a couple years ago, and that takes care of any of that. If something's open, it's gone. So, there's just, there's some things like we noticed in the summertime, they didn't seem to handle the fescue as well, and we thought, well, they just aren't handling the fescue. Well, most of the cows that didn't handle the fescue had the open. So, that abortions, early term abortions, had the opportunity to calve out some cows for my neighbor, which were Brahma, Holstein cross, 3-year-old heifers, and then he wasn't in town, and they would have the calf, and 2 days later they'd be dead. And so, of course, with him not there, I had the vet come out, and we posted them, and those cows just looked like they had cauliflower in them, and they were just full of, so the stress of calving just took them out. I don't know, it's up to you. I agree with Ben, it's really hard to manage, it's out there everywhere. I don't know what the answer is. I think it's a personal answer that everybody's got to come up with. Quarantining is not always easy. It's very difficult to have a quarantine herd. Very difficult, and Yonis was even worse. We never had a positive Yonis cow, but some would throw a titer and you got to separate them for 4 months. So I would agree with probably most of the population. It just wasn't worth testing. It was too hard. So I guess you just got to dig deep and educate yourself about it and decide what's important to you, and then go from there.
Ben, as you guys sell as many cattle as most people in Missouri or more, and what's some health things you all do there at Side Strickers that you can put out there to let your customer base know when you come to Side Strickers, these cattle have had these things done, the health on these cattle, when they come through that sale ring, they're healthy. What are some things, some steps you guys take in order to do that?
We still maintain a certified brucellosis-free herd, and that puts every cow through the chute there in March and April of every year. It's also a good time to worm with valpaison, which will get a whole, everybody, or a lot of people have gotten accustomed to the pour-ons. They're so easy, and you can do a good job with your worms there, but a white worm or drench once a year sure helps from that point of view, that the cattle will be healthy from that point of view. Controlling lice and all of those things, of course, having a good vaccination program here a few years ago, when there were some red water bricks, river flukes in Missouri, we learned we need to go back to an 8-way black leg instead of just a 7, and those. And then once you get your cow herd immunity built up, then you can keep it. When we're buying cattle, we know where they come from. We're a little bit like a feedlot, just because they do have a pretty good vaccination program. We still generally booster them when they come in before they go out with other cattle.
Well, I think on those same notes that as we go through, and of course I've been with you guys for a long time at your sale each year, but in the sale catalog each year, you'll list if for some reason one of the females didn't get a Bangs vaccination. And why do you make sure that your customers know that? And then I guess the rest of that, what measures do you take with those potential customers on those cattle that haven't had that vaccine?
Well, there are just a few states in the U.S. that do require a real OCV tattoo or proof of Angus vaccination in some way. I think EID tags are being accepted now too, as long as it was done in conjunction with their calf foot vaccination. But we do it mostly as a guide to the people that live in those states, so that they're not bidding on one that cannot be transported to their state. At the same time that we do that, we also check every female going through the sale to make sure they have a legible tattoo ID. Just because on the buying end of things, we found almost 30% of the cattle that we buy did not have a legible tattoo. And it's kind of a pain then to draw DNA, confirm it is the correct animal, and go through the hoops then to actually put a readable tattoo in that animal's ear. But that's part of our protocol to make sure that we're not passing on anything too, but we try to check them real close when they do come in and get those problems rectified before they get out in the herd.
I think that's a great point in identification of these cattle is, when you're dealing with 10 or 15 cows, it's pretty easy to know which is which, but then you get up into dealing with 200, 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 head, and something goes out and loses an ear tag, and doesn't have a freeze brand, you got to figure out what that is. The legible tattoo, or now with our technology of EIDs, I think both of those things can sure assist in that process of making sure you know what they are, especially with the way we're DNAing these cattle now. We don't want to have to go back and DNA something just to figure out what exactly it is. And back to our customers, we don't want to sell them an animal that we said was out of 4220 and ends up out of 5180, something like that, just because of a simple error. So I think those are great points. And back to you, Doc. How important is a vaccination program for those of us in this room that are purebred breeders, and those of us, the folks out there that are going to be watching this on YouTube that are raising seed stock, or maybe they're a cow-calf operation and are selling their calves at weaning? But how important is a vaccination program for a herd?
Take it from my bias, I'm a veterinarian, but I'm also a producer just like you guys. And basically, I'll just take you through what I think is a basic vaccination protocol. And when I say that is through the years, so I've been doing this 38 years, I would prefer to manage things to not create or put another vaccine in a schedule. So I'll just kind of walk you through what I recommend, what I do with my herd, and I've got some registered cows, we've got some commercial cows. But the first time when we work the calves in the spring, I'm probably going to get a black light for those calves. Okay, and then prior to weaning, I like to have 2 rounds of a modified live with lepto and a black light. And I like to have 2 rounds of that, and preferably, I like the second shot at least 2 weeks before I'm weaning. Now that doesn't always happen. Not this last summer, the summer before when it got dry, we ended up weaning at the time of the second vaccination, which is okay, but preferably I like it beforehand. Because the calf's going to take about 2 weeks to ramp up that immunity. So modified live with a lepto plus a black leg. The next time those calves are going to get something is pre-breeding. And once again, taking my bias, I like the Show Me Select Heifer program. I've been involved in all 19 years I've been at Mizzou. Dr. Patterson did a great job. So we will work. I don't necessarily enter the Show Me Heifer program, but I will use those same parameters for working my heifers. And at that time, they're going to get a booster of the modified live with lepto, and black leg, and go back to your, I like to do a white dewormer at that time. And so then, the next time they'll get vaccinated is when I do a brake check, and they'll get a booster for the left toe. And then that heifer, as a pregnant heifer, they'll get 2 rounds of a scour vaccine prior to calf. And then they go into the cowbird, and the cowbird's going to get a pre-breeding modified live with lepto at pregnancy, and a booster each year for the scours. And so that's, and then in the fall, if I can, I might use a poron dewormer because I can get the lice with the poron versus a white dewormer. But that's kind of a basic vaccination protocol that I like, which I do. And once again, I may at times, we've used some pink dye vaccine or for the bulls, some Poock rot vaccine and those kind of things, but that is kind of a basic program that I think, even if you're a commercial person and you're selling calves or going to feedlots, you know, having some kind of backgrounded program too is going to be helpful.
Those steers to the feedlot, the more you can tell them about your vaccination program, I would think just increases the value of your product to those. If you can document what you've done, it just increases the value of those calves going through the market.
So when I was in practice, I did exactly that. I would fill out the paperwork for them to be able to take that and I do it for ours now. We fill out and we send that along with the calves, so it's following them. So the buyers, feedlots know what they've had prior.
Did you vaccinate for tuberculosis?
Okay, I do not vaccinate for vibriosis. And we changed that in the Show Me Select for 2 reasons. One, it was getting hard to get vibriosis vaccine. So on the Show Me Select heifer program, it's optional. And 2, and you might argue, well, we haven't seen vibriosis because we've been vaccinating for it. But even in the dairy world, we don't use as much bull power. Bull clean up natural service, but vibriosis, I don't know when the last case of vibriosis has been diagnosed in the United States. So I'm not against it. If you want to use it, it's okay, but personally, I don't.
All of us here, when you go to order a vaccine, it becomes a question of, you know, how many people you want to put in them, try to keep that as low as possible, and the alphabet soup of putting it together sometime, and if that's one that sure could be dropped out at least occasionally, you know, that would be, because I knew I hadn't heard of any vibriosis, but I didn't realize it was that close to extinction, I guess.
Go along the same lines of health and selling cattle and purchasing cattle, Holly, how important is foot quality and foot health in 2 things? From selling those cattle to your customers, selling those bulls to your customers, and also maybe you're going out and you're purchasing a bull, you're purchasing females. How important is foot quality and foot health to you guys at Bub Ranch?
It's extremely important, as it should be for everybody in this room or watching. We all know, let's not beat around the bush, that foot quality's been an issue in our breed and a lot of breeds the last several years, and if we aren't diligent about keeping those feet structured the right way where they have some longevity, then we're all in trouble. So as a person that predominantly sells bulls, obviously the females' feet in our herd have to be good as well, but we kind of take the approach where if they've got to be trimmed, we market them through the sale barn. I'm not going to sell them to another breeder, and certainly with a bull, if the feet have got to be trimmed, it's not going to make the bull cut at our house. I think long term, if you just look at what happens with cattle with bad toes, they end up lame, they end up with big corns in their feet, and they just don't last as long. So once again, as far as a bottom line, with cost to producer, we've got to keep our feet healthy, and we've got to be honest with ourselves. When we look at them at yearling and we see a little, what I call a banana toe coming on, then we need to peel that banana and get it out of there. So again, that's a personal thought of ours, you know, how hard a person wants to be with that. Same with what we were talking earlier about like pink eye. We just kind of started getting rid of cows that had issues with pink eye or pulling those cow families out as we could. And we rarely treat it. That doesn't mean we won't get hammered this year. But for the most part, you know, there's a lot of things that are genetic, and feet are certainly one of those things. And we can kind of lie to ourselves, but in the end it comes back to honest. So I think foot quality is extremely important to long-term herd health.
You know, and I have this conversation with a lot of my clients who I'm going and selling their sales for, and I know Ben and I have talked about it some in the past too, but Ben, maybe over to you. I know you guys are very strenuous on foot quality as well, and make some major breeding decisions within that, but with those breeding decisions and the steps you have taken over the many, many years, are you seeing your customers appreciate the quality of those bulls for years to come, for years down the road with those bulls they purchase each fall?
That's helped quite a bit. But just one side though on the foot issues is there is also some cattle that have feet that would look perfect to anyone who is looking at them, and yet still in Missouri's humid environment tend to have feet that would be soft, so to speak, and more prone to get abscesses and that kind of thing. That's still a bit of an issue that we don't have any kind of handle on as far as where to look for it, I guess. Yeah, it'll probably turn out to be somewhat genetic, but you know, it's just that the years that are extremely wet for an extended period of time, and depending on what your conditions are too, you know, some lots that happen to have fresh gravel, for instance, you know, can play a negative role sometimes too. So that's one that's a little off the wall, that tricky to get a handle on sometimes.
Do you have anything that you would add as our resident expert here, as our doctor?
Okay. Sometimes people ask me how good a veterinarian am, and I say, I don't know how good I am, but I really enjoy what I do. So take that. Yeah, I think lameness is a big issue, and because I've spent most of my career in the dairy world, you know, the 3 reasons a dairy cow leaves is probably mastitis, reproduction, or lameness. And so, like Ben was saying, you know, we here in Missouri, where we're flushing the alleyways, cows can get a little soft on their hooves too. But I think the genetic part is important, and I know the Angus breed, you have some hoof EPDs. I think that's great, and I look, when I'm breeding for my Sim Angus, I'm looking at that in the Angus EPDs as well. But it's the same in the Holstein world. We don't call them EPDs, we call them PTAs, but we have PTAs that will look at hoof health. And so we at the University of Missouri, at Foremost Dairy, we use that to choose bulls as well.
Excellent, excellent. But this time we're getting close to wrapping things up, but I did want to open up and see if anybody out here in our audience might have any questions for our 3 panelists that we might not have covered. Does anybody have any questions today? Maybe Tyler does. So Mary Jo was asking, have you run across much blue-green algae? They had some trouble in their herd. They lost a couple cows, you said, 2 cows to that.
Personally, I have not. A contact I would give you to talk about that would be Dr. Tim Evans. He's the toxicologist. You would enjoy it, and he is a very valuable resource. So Dr. Evans is in the veterinary school, and if you want to contact me, I get his contact you next.
They had fresh water, but it was so hot, like in October, they would stand in the pond, and when we tested the water, they told us not even to put our hands in it, but they could absorb it through their eyes.
Yeah. So you're going to have, is that pond, is there runoff from fields or something in that pond? It just got so warm
Yeah, and it was weird because it was the night that the northern lights came. I wondered if the pond would turn or something. I don't know, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, once again, if you can contact Dr. Evans, he's a wealth of information.
That's the first I've ever, witnessed anything like that.
Yeah, Dr. Evans, if I ride with him and we're going down the road, he's looking at plants all over the place because he can tell you, oh, that plant, and this is what happened, and he'd probably enjoy a conversation.
Thank you.
Super. Anybody else have any questions for our panelists? Great.
What's the thoughts on vaccination for salmonella or pasteurella?
Vaccination for salmonella and pasteurella.
Okay, I'll start with salmonella first, and there are some good vaccines for salmonella. My experience is when you have a problem with salmonella, you have to clean up the environment. And my experience is we can clean up the environment, get the source out of the way by the time you can vaccinate. So my preference would be, let's clean up the environment, let's reduce the exposure. Like I said, if that's going to take too long or it's not quite possible, salmonella vaccines are pretty good. Pasteurella, if I'm going to be moving cattle long distances, that seems to expose animals more so to getting pasteurella. So in those situations, I would vaccinate. I used to routinely vaccinate my weaned calves with pasteurella, but we're not moving them very far, and so I moved away from it. Usually, once again, if I can control the viruses, I can control pasteurella. So my preference would be to control my management so I decrease exposure. But with the pasteurella, if I know my calves are going out to western Kansas to the feed yard, well then I would probably use a pasteurella. So cleaning up the environment. So I'm going to clean up my equipment. I'm going to, if I have a field that I think is the exposure, I'm going to go in there and probably disc it up, turn it over, and then I'm going to let it bear the sunlight to keep my cattle off. But then we're going to come back to the equipment. Any equipment that I'm using to feed the cattle is going over manure, that all has to be disinfected and cleaned to try to minimize contact of manure and feeding equipment.
Excellent points. Yes, Phil. So for our video purposes here, Darla's asking about some biosecurity measures that seed stock producers could take in comparison to what the poultry and the swine industry is doing.
Okay, so living in the dairy world, the bird flu is very pertinent at this time. So in the beef world, for some reason, this virus loves the mammary gland, and that's where it's attacking the dairy cows. So the dairy heifers, the dry cows, and as far as we know, the beef cattle, they might get it, but it'll come and go. Maybe they get a runny nose. That's about it. It's the lactating cow, and for some reason it loves the mammary gland. And so, but if I'm a beef producer, so the dairy world for biosecurity against bird flu, number one is I want to control who's coming in and out. And if I have people coming in, either I'm going to create a boot wash for them with disinfectant. Bicrin is a disinfectant that kills bird flu, or I'm going to provide them with boots. On dairies, the workers who are on dairies, what we like them to do is they have their work clothes at the farm. They come to the farm, they put on work clothes, they work, they take off work clothes, and they go home. Okay, so their work clothes are different than the clothes that are going around other places. Okay. One of the dairies that got it was the workers. They had workers in the house that were working at the dairy, and they had working at a poultry. And it was that it wasn't that this poultry person came to the dairy, but the poultry person was the same house. And so it's really important. There's clothes for at your farm, and there's clothes when you go home. So boots, boot wash, clothes that are just worn on the farm, and then just keep track of who's on your farm.
Go ahead.
I think what Darla really wanted you to say was, we need more cats to kill these birds.
There's plenty of cats.
But don't let the cats drink the milk.
All right. Well, we've had some excellent discussion here, and I hope everybody that is in attendance has enjoyed this. I hope everybody that is online enjoys this time. Appreciate Julie taking the time to line this panel up, and Holly, I know you did a lot of work as well getting this lined up. I want to say thank you to Sierra for videoing this for us. And with that, I want to say a personal thank you to each of the three of you for taking time, coming out here this weekend and sharing your knowledge with us as breeders. So with that, folks, we appreciate all of you coming out today, and thank you all very much.